She took a hit to the throat, right in front of thousands, and the refs didn't even blink. Caitlin Clark, the most talked about rookie in the WNBA, went down hard and got no call. But what happened next wasn't just about pain, it was about power. Because when the league stayed silent, Caitlin answered the moment no one expected. It didn't happen during one of those chaotic drives into the paint where limbs get tangled and everything is a blur. It wasn't a scuffle under the basket or the result of diving for a loose ball. It was calm, it was controlled, and it was unmistakably intentional. Caitlin Clark had just crossed the half-court line, guiding Indiana into their half-court set. Her dribble was steady, her posture relaxed but alert. She was doing what she always does, reading the floor, calling the tempo, assessing options. But before she could take the next step, Tiffany Hayes made her move. At first, it looked like routine pressure defense. Hayes got in her stance, active hands, tight hips, mirroring Clark's every bounce. Then came the forearm, not to the shoulder, not to the chest, straight to the throat. It was sharp, it was quick, and it was undeniable. Clark jolted slightly, absorbing the hit, her instincts forcing her forward out of habit. But within seconds, her hand dropped to her neck, her knees buckled, and she fell right there in the open court. No contact besides the one that had just happened. Thousands of fans saw it live, cameras caught every angle, the commentary team froze, unsure if this was real, but the referees, silent. No whistle, no technical, no stoppage of play. It was as if nothing had happened. And yet everyone watching knew something very serious had just occurred. What followed wasn't just about the foul that never got called. It was about what Clark would do with the silence, or if the league won't protect her, she'll protect herself. As Caitlin Clark sat on the hardwood, holding her throat and gasping through the shock of what had just happened, the response from the officiating crew was deafening in its silence. There was no call, no flagrant review, no discussion. Tiffany Hayes simply circled back, eyes locked on the ball, as if nothing out of the ordinary had taken place. And in a way, that's what made it worse. Because this wasn't some behind-the-play tangle or accidental elbow, it was a forearm shiver delivered to the neck of the WNBA's most watched rookie, in plain view of every camera and every fan, and still nothing. For Caitlin, though, this wasn't a new story. From the moment she entered the league, she's been told, both directly and indirectly, that the rules of engagement don't apply the same way when it comes to her. Hard screens go unchecked, slaps across the arm, let them play. Now, a strike to the throat had become just another ignored chapter in a growing pattern. But Clark, in that moment, didn't plead with the officials. She didn't gesticulate or dramatize. She simply stood up, straightened her jersey, and walked back into the huddle with fire in her eyes. Because Caitlin Clark doesn't need sympathy. What she needs, what she demands, is the ball. And when she gets it, the league gets its answer. Not in words, not in tweets, but in points, precision, and poise under pressure. If the whistle won't come, then Clark will speak through buckets, loud enough that everyone, even the silent refs, will hear it. 3. A message delivered in buckets. When Caitlin Clark returned to the floor after that brutal no call, something shifted. Not in the crowd, they were already on her side. Not in the officials, they remained as still as ever. The shift was within her. She didn't explode in rage or force the next few possessions. Instead, she played with ice in her veins. On her next touch, she drove hard toward the free throw line, came to a sudden stop, and rose into a crisp, balanced jump. It splashed through, and the crowd responded like she'd hit a game winner. It wasn't just 2 points. It was a signal. That shot wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming control. Moments later, the Fever pushed in, semi-transition, and again, Clark had the ball. Her defender squared up, but she stepped back, deeper this time, and let it fly. Nothing but net. In under a minute, Clark went from silence to defiance, and the entire momentum of the game teetered. These weren't lucky makes or heat checks. They were deliberate, calculated, surgical. And they reminded everyone, fans, commentators, and even her opponents, that you can knock Caitlin Clark down, but you better make sure she stays there. Because if she gets up, she's not just playing to score, she's playing to make a statement. And now the Valkyries had a different problem to solve. The version of Clark who doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, and certainly doesn't forget. 4. Blow for blow, the Valkyries keep swinging. Fever may have found their footing, but the Valkyries weren't about to let them run away with the night. This wasn't a one-woman show anymore. Both teams had locked in, and every trip down the floor became a battle. Veronica Burton, calm and deadly, kept slicing through Indiana's defense with pinpoint passes and rhythm jumpers. Her presence at the top of the key was a constant threat, forcing the Fever to stretch their coverage. And when Caitlin Chen got the ball, she didn't hesitate to go straight at Clark, using hesitation moves and slick footwork to shake free and score inside. Indiana responded with grit. Lexi Hull fought for second-chance opportunities, tipping out rebounds and diving on the floor. Sophie Cunningham came alive on the perimeter, knocking down a timely 3 that reignited the Fever's energy. But the Valkyries matched every effort. The first quarter closed with back-to-back buckets on both sides, a chess match where no one blinked. By the time the buzzer sounded, Indiana had clawed their way to a slim lead, 23-19. It wasn't flashy or clean, but it was hard-earned. And most importantly, it proved this game wouldn't be defined by one moment. It would be a war of runs, resilience, and resolve. 5. A battle of wits in quarter 2. The second quarter was less about raw emotion and more about execution. The Valkyries opened the frame with Letitia Amir taking over. She danced at the top of the key, isolated her defender, and with a quick crossover and explosive step, she attacked the paint and laid it in with her offhand. Indiana struck right back. Caitlin Clark ran a high pick and roll, drew 2 defenders, and in perfect rhythm, fired a cross-court dart to Lexi Hull wide open on the wing. Hull's release was smooth and the net barely moved, but even as Indiana started moving the ball beautifully, the Valkyries kept delivering body blows. Off-ball screens freed up Burton for another triple. Then Chen found herself in the corner with splash splash. It was relentless clinical basketball. The Fever tried to answer with inside-out movement. Kelsey Mitchell slashed into the lane, collapsed the defense, and kicked it out to Natasha Howard, who made the extra pass to Aaliyah Boston for an easy finish. It was beautiful, but not enough. Tiffany Hayes started heating up, splitting pick and rolls, finding shooters, and finally finishing tough layups herself. Each possession from the Valkyries felt rehearsed, like they had already solved Indiana's scheme. By halftime, the Valkyries led 41-32. It wasn't just a matter of missed calls anymore. It was about whether Indiana could keep up with a team that refused to miss or misstep. 6. The third quarter meltdown. Indiana came out of the break needing a run, but instead they walked into a storm. The Valkyries wasted no time. Off a sideline inbounds, Jasmine Martin sealed Caitlin Clark inside the paint. A lob pass dropped in perfectly and Martin laid it in with ease. Then came the knockout sequence. Martin drifted to the perimeter, jabbed once, and drilled a 3 with her defender scrambling. Timeout Fever. Their coach stormed onto the court, jawing at the players before they'd even reached the huddle. The defense was in disarray, communication fractured. Out of the timeout, Mitchell responded with a pull-up 3, punished the drop coverage, and gave Indiana a flicker of hope. But the Valkyries slammed the door right back. Hayes, ever the conductor, drove hard and kicked out to Kayla Thornton, who nailed a wing jumper. Indiana couldn't get stops, and even when they did, second chance points destroyed them. The ball would ricochet out, and suddenly Burton was open. Another 3. Clark tried to swing the tide with one of her signature bombs from deep, pulling up in transition and draining it with icy calm. But even her magic wasn't enough to reverse the damage. By quarter's end, the Valkyries had stretched their lead to 13. It wasn't slipping, it was cracking. 7. When the star can't do it alone. Caitlin Clark's brilliance was on full display in the third quarter, but she couldn't outrun the numbers game. For every 3 she hit, or transition finish she manufactured, the Valkyries responded with a system built to break opponents down. Offensive rebounds turned into instant 3s. Burton, who was already having the game of her season, continued to exploit every misstep. She moved like a veteran chess player, staying one rotation ahead of Indiana's defense. The Fever needed help, not just hustle, but scoring depth. Clark's off-ball movement opened windows, but those windows weren't capitalized on. Her passes hit shooters in the hands, but the shots rimmed out. Meanwhile, the Valkyries did not hesitate. Thornton, always in the right corner at the right time, kept hitting dagger after dagger. When she wasn't shooting, she was feeding teammates, moving the ball before Indiana could even rotate. And in the rare moments Indiana got a stop, the Valkyries still managed to reset and punish them. It wasn't about Clark being off. She wasn't. It was about her carrying weight too heavy for one player. The Valkyries had a machine, Indiana had a superstar, and by the end of the third, it was clear which one was winning. 8. The final quarter. One spark isn't enough. The Fever opened the fourth quarter knowing they had to be nearly perfect and fast, but before they could even settle, the Valkyries struck again. Tammy Fagbenle rolled hard off a screen, caught the ball in stride, drew contact, and sank both free throws. The lead widened. Caitlin Clark tried to shift the momentum herself. After a defensive rebound, she pushed the tempo, weaving through defenders and flipping in a high-arcing layup that banked softly off the glass. The crowd surged. It felt like the start of something, but the Valkyries had no interest in drama. Kayla Thornton, relentless as ever, grabbed another offensive rebound on the next possession, kicked it out to Burton, and boom, another three. And then another, just minutes later. Indiana simply couldn't trade twos for threes. Even when Lexi Hall attacked off a handoff and finished at the rim with control and poise, it felt like paddling against a rising tide. The Valkyries were a machine, clicking on every possession, with Burton quarterbacking and Thornton punishing every gap. The Fever didn't give up, they never do, but the math was unforgiving. Even Clark's bursts of brilliance couldn't stop what was now inevitable. One spark can light a fire, but it takes a team to keep it burning. And tonight, only one side had that fuel. 9, a glimmer named Timpson. Just when it seemed like Indiana had run out of stories to tell in this game, one unexpected name stepped into the spotlight: Aaliyah Timpson. With under 2 minutes remaining and the game essentially decided, she didn't just play out the clock, she made it count. Working her defender deep into the post, she spun off her left shoulder and dropped in a silky left-hand hook. The bench stood up. A few plays later, McDonald drove hard, drew the help, and dished it back to Timpson, who calmly rose for a righty hook that floated in clean. 10 points, quietly, efficiently, and from a player who barely seized floor time. It didn't change the outcome, but it meant something. For a team searching for consistency, flashes like that are hope. While the scoreboard showed defeat, moments like Timpson's are where foundations are built. It was grit, composure, and a refusal to be invisible. These are the little victories that don't make headlines, but shape the future of a franchise. And while the crowd applauded politely, the Fever staff likely took serious note. Because when you're building something, and Indiana is, you look for players who answer when no one's watching. Tonight, Timpson answered loud and clear. 10. No whistle, no help, just fire. As the final buzzer sounded and the Valkyries walked off with an 80-61 win, Caitlin Clark didn't gesture toward the officials. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her performance had already spoken. From the throat shot in the opening minutes to the silence from the refs, Clark had absorbed everything thrown her way and responded with the kind of composure that's impossible to teach. There were no theatrics, no cheap fouls in return, just basketball. Painful, relentless, passionate basketball. The league may not offer her protection, the referees may miss what the whole crowd sees, but what no one can deny is that Caitlin Clark is already becoming more than a rookie. She's a symbol of persistence for every young player watching who's been hit and ignored, for every fan tired of seeing talent disrespected. And the way she handles it, that's the real story. The fire that follows the silence. The buckets that follow the bruises. She isn't asking for help. She's forcing everyone to respect her whether they want to or not. And with every game, every hard-fought possession, she's proving that she's not just playing in the league, she's changing it.